Intimacy Back Show, where intimacy is real. If you desire to intimately connect with yourself, your significant other, children, family, friends, community, and higher power, this show is for you. We explore intimate topics, inspiring life stories, spirituality, and insightful tips on strengthening relationships. The show is hosted by Dr. April and her co-host, Coach K. Let's get this episode of the Bringing Intimacy Back Show started. We share with you today the secret power to intimacy to create a life you love or love the life you create. Now, here's your host, Dr. April, and co-host, Coach K.
Hey, welcome back to the Bringing Intimacy Show, where intimacy is real. How are you doing, Coach K?
I am doing amazing on this Good Thursday. And how about yourself?
I was doing good until I noticed this halo over my head. Seemed like it. Anyway.
That's all right. That's just your one of your chakras glowing. That's all.
Yes. And it's not that it's a halo. I'm not all that innocent. But anyway. Yes. So I am so happy we are in the month of September. And you know what? In the month of September, all our children are back in school.
Yes. With all of the winding down of summer, new challenges of new people and interactions and life.
Yes. And I'm so happy today because we're actually talking about children, which is a passion of mine because all of us have gone through it, number one. And number two, it is, as you and I deal a lot with couples and other kind of stuff, children, how we are as adults has really been because of what we see in childhood.
Absolutely.
And people do not understand the importance of childhood.
They don't. They feel like, once I hit 18, everything beyond, behind that erases and I just start this new life.
Yes. Yeah. And I think people, even when they have kids, I always thought it'd be great if out of my vagina, the baby came and the manual, but that didn't happen.
Right. They left the manual behind.
Yeah. And people don't understand. I mean, it's a skill to raise your kid and to raise it properly. And yes.
And it doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't stop.
Yeah, it doesn't stop until you leave this earth. That's, I think, a major misconception of parenting.
Right. And I think from my understanding, just from especially those teenage years and young adult years are so important. Yes.
Yeah, it makes you miss your 5-year-old when your 13-year-old starts stomping around and you want to just pick them up by the back of their necks.
Yes, definitely. Yes. And so for one of our nonprofits for the month of September, it is a nonprofit called www.activeminds.org. And their main mission is to help young people with mental health issues, which is a great thing because many times we don't think about our adolescents or our young people having mental health issues and having a resource for them. So I'm so glad that there is an organization out there.
Yeah, this is awesome, especially dedicated to children and not just the broad.
Right. So I know I've been out of the field a little bit with children, but guess what? We are bringing in an expert, yes, who knows about children and, the latest thing that's happening with them, but also teaching us relationship skills. Because
So
how
important.
my mom talked to me is different than how I talk to my daughter, who's now 27. It is also probably different talking to your young people today. It's that relationship skill.
Absolutely. And I have 5 and I talk to each one of them differently about the relationships because they each have their own personality and likes, wants, and needs and desires.
Right. Definitely. So we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to have Dr. Roseann Capanna, sorry, hopefully I said it right, Hodge, to come back to talk about building relationship skills with children and kids.
A must-have for parents to be, first-time parents, empty nesters, and parents all around. There are infinite ways to parent a child, but the trick is trying to figure out the best way that fits you and your child. Create strong connections during pregnancy, to not pulling your hair out during the terrible twos, navigating puberty, and having adult conversations with your adult children. The Intimacy of Parenthood covers it all, and it is now on Amazon, available in Kindle, Audible, and paperback.
Welcome, Dr. Roseann. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited for this conversation about how to build relationship skills at any age, because we need more of this conversation.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And so this topic, our show is called Bringing Intimacy Back. And I love to hear what each guest member we have define intimacy as. What do you feel like intimacy is?
The word intimacy to me is so multifaceted, right? It's not, when we think of intimacy, we only think of sex, but in a lot of ways, but it's, special private moments that occur, between people. That's really what I think of as intimacy.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
We're talking about children. And you see, you do the whole span. Let's even start at the beginning with childbirth.
Yeah.
Intimate moment. Yes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a moment that, no matter how much anybody prepares you, I don't think anybody tells a mother that the moment you give birth, you worry. And you're all of a sudden this thing that you had all these hopes and dreams for has come out.
Right.
And hopefully the baby is healthy, because that's not always the case. Right. And, it's just such a private moment. If you're lucky enough to share that with a partner in life, it's one of the most intimate moments you'll ever experience. We always tell our kids like these funny stories and things that happen in our birth, right? Our labor story. But, it's the first opportunity to bond as a family, with your baby, and bonding and relationships only occur when you give attention and spend time.
Right, definitely. And I probably should have backed up until pregnancy, because I know you can bond in pregnancy, and yes, the importance of bonding there.
Yeah, it's so important, and it's so important to keep your stress levels in check, because it's very clear through research that high stress negatively impacts the baby.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So, then there's so many aspects even of that, right? Like one of my best friends is Dr. Cleopatra Camperveen. She's a fertility expert, and she became a fertility expert because her mother was denied proper care as a Black woman, and she died giving birth to her and a twin sister. So and it's such a moment of the things that happen along the way in pregnancy. Sometimes things don't go the way that you expect, right? And so we have to try in all aspects of parenting right from the beginning to try to do the best to care for ourselves, so that we can role model that for our children as well, right? And I think that's really, really important in building relationships, in building coping skills. It's the foundation of mental health is good coping skills.
Yeah. And I will honestly say, because I became a birth and postpartum doula, and one of the things that I always wanted to do was just a preparing for baby 3-week course with all of the things that no one tells you when you go to your doctor's appointments, when you leave the hospital.
Yes.
And all of the hoopla dies down, and it's just you and this new life at home. And how do you bridge that gap? So that goes into a lot of what you do, which is building those relationships.
Yeah. Well, and there's just so many feelings that, there's so much mental health aspects, even as a new mother, and navigating the change. And there's so many joys and there's downs, and, postpartum is so normal, right? 1 in 10, 1 in 7, I think 1 in 10. And then, and even postpartum, other issues that can come up can be, can interfere with the bonding process too, and the relationship building process. I don't think anybody talks about that too often, So much needed, you know, because it is exciting, you know, it's very exciting. And hopefully you have someone in your life that nurtures you as a mother when you have your baby, right? Whether that's a partner or a grandparent or a relative to give you extra support, because it's like you can't have enough hands either when you have a new baby. At least the first one.
Yes.
Second or third one, you're like, here, I'll leave it with the cat. The cat will take care of it.
Meow if you need me.
The first one, you're like, I can't take a shower, you know, like all that. After that, you're like, yeah, okay. It's all right.
Yes. Yeah. So you have tons of experience working with kids. And I know you're the founder of the Global Institute of Children's Mental Health.
Yeah.
What makes you create that?
Yeah. Well, right before the pandemic in January 2020, I was like, I am just so concerned, you know, about kids' mental health. It had been almost 3 decades. Now it's 3 decades. And, you know, in this time, we've had so much enlightenment and technology and all these things, but yet mental health seems to be worsened. Not seems, the data shows us it's much worse. Autism just through the roof. Family stress levels so high through research. And I really wanted to, you know, make a commitment. So I have this center in Ridgefield, Connecticut. I work with people all over the world because I work with people virtually doing like neurofeedback and PEMF and all these other things. And I wanted people to know that if we use science-backed solutions, there are many holistic solutions that change the brain, that calm the brain, and that parents need to know it's going to be okay. They don't always have to do a psychiatric med. In fact, they should almost never do a psychiatric med, and that there are many resources available to them that they just are not being made aware of. And so that is why I created the Global Institute of Children's Mental Health as a platform, you know, to give people access, no matter what their income level is, to educational tools, books, you know, resources and things like that.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I know one of the things you specialize in is ADHD or hyperactivity. And I'm just thinking you created this in a time period where the world was kind of shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kids were at home. And, you know, people even had little 5-year-olds on computer trying to learn kindergarten stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So tell me how that all ties in together, what you do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, gosh, when you think about the early part of the pandemic, right, doesn't it seem so long ago?
Yeah.
I think people were ill-equipped. I mean, we're parents. We barely can learn how to parent unless you've been trained for behavioralism. Then all of a sudden you're a teacher. You know, you're a teacher, you're a short order cook. If you had a job, you were doing it at the same time. You know, it was like a lot. It was very, very stressful. People were breaking down. I never saw more adults reach out for mental health help than, and we know this, right? And so what happened is a bunch of things. We saw that learning on a computer was not optimal for most kids. Right. We saw that you needed structure and routine. And I think families that did well put structure and routine in place. And that seemed to balance things out. And I also think parents really got a bird's eye view of exactly what was going wrong or right with their kids. Like, so my favorite meme in the pandemic is a John Amos meme. And it said the teacher wasn't the F problem. And the gist of that, the gist of that was you thought the teacher was losing their mind about your kids having problems, and now you know it was your kid had something going on. So all of a sudden, like, therapists became the hottest commodity. And the first year at the end of 2020, the #1 New Year's resolution was go to a therapist. Yeah. So, you know, we got to see what happens. You know, people are living very stressed lives. The Hodge life, I mean, we didn't really notice much of anything different. You know, we're pretty alternative kind of people. We don't do things the same as everybody else. And a lot of my friends, we were pretty fine. You know, we created our own little bubble. Grammy was in our bubble. We were still seeing people and doing things. And in fact, I was still going to work every day with a small group of people because we were like, we're going to lose our minds if we're not in it. And nobody was on the highway, and you literally could drive 100 miles an hour.
Exactly.
Nobody was
Right.
over. Some of my best days.
Yes.
So, but you know, when it came to kids and families, I mean, they were struggling. There was a lot of stress for people. The hum of the unknown of this disease and what it was going to do. And I'm outside of New York City. I mean, this was ground zero for death. There were places even near me where you could drive, and there were bodies in air conditioned units because there was no place to put people. I mean, that was our reality. So there was valid fear, but when it comes to kids, they follow our lead as parents.
Exactly.
That's how it works, people. You got it together, your kid's going to have it together most of the time. Nobody's perfect. If you're a hot mess and a stress, they're going to be a hot mess and a stress. So the kids that did the best were the parents who were like, hey, this is some rough stuff, but this is what we're going to do. This, and this.
Right.
And it's going to be okay. And the kids fared well. I had a kid here and there that did well with virtual learning, but most kids, they hated it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
I mean, hey, you had kids. How did your kids do?
Two of them did pretty well, but the one who would rather never be in school, he did the bare minimum, but they did good for the most part. It was one in 9th grade, one in 8th grade, and then one in like 4th grade. So luckily I didn't have the smaller ones. And because it was 3 of them, they still got some human interaction.
That's
so I
right.
think about the kids that it was just them without other bonding and human interaction.
Yeah. I mean, we are human beings. We are designed to interact and connect with others. And, you know, I think that was definitely a source of depression, particularly for teenagers and college kids. I saw them more affected by this than any other group, including adults.
Right. Because many of them weren't able to do some of the fun things.
Yeah.
Were, you know, like prom, homecoming, that they were like so prepared to do, and now, or even going over to the movies.
That's right.
Yeah. Socialization.
All those developmentally normal things where kids build autonomy, right? And they that was robbed of them, you know, like instead they were home and their mother's like, who are you texting? You know?
Yes.
And then the parents are stressed, and so the kid is now double stressed because you know, children typically take on the responsibility of the adult, and then they formulate stories of why they're stressed.
That's right. And they don't, you know, I think what people don't realize, you know, that energetic imprint, the non-verbal ways that we show our happiness and our displeasure, right? And so when we're super stressed, and especially when parents try to hold it in and be like, oh my gosh, like yesterday, I was like, I had this weird day yesterday. I was telling my teenager, I started first thing in the morning, I fired somebody. And he was like, you did? What happened? And then I told him, and I was like, but it's all right because of this, that, and the other thing. But then what was really stressful is I had to race to here and do this and then go to the back to school meeting and whatever. And he was like, oh, okay. So he was asking me about Slana. I was like, we'll work on that this weekend. He was like, all right. You know, so it's good to have those real conversations.
Right, Roseann, because many people don't say that. Right. You know what I'm saying? They keep it all in. They say, I'm fine. And whatever comes out of their mouth is not their behavior.
Exactly. Exactly. And I want my kids to know there are problems in the world. You know what I mean? So I don't want them to think life is perfect by any means, or am I perfect?
Right.
You know?
Because you got to be resilient.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was good. I mean, he asked me, like, what happened when you fired him? So I was like, well, I didn't have to fire him. My chief of staff had to fire him. So I was like, and this is a new thing for me. So I was like, this is pretty awesome. You know what I mean? I was like, he knew it was coming. He's like, oh, you did. So it was great, you know, to hear that or whatever. And then I was like, you know, I got to do some stuff to de-stress. So I'm going to do this, this, and this. I always talked about my kids. You have to counter stress, and there's good stress and bad stress. And good stress is fun stuff too. Sometimes we don't think about, like, when we're doing something really fun, that it's stressful too, right? I think about travel now. It feels so stressful to me. Like, it's so hard to get on an airplane now.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So Dr. Roseann, I know we have a question from Ashley, a parent. She's wondering, how do you talk to your teenagers? Because, you know, she feels like her son is just locked up in a room with the computer, playing video games. It's wrong, you know, house school, fine.
Yeah. So first of all, in our house, we use a device called Grapheon. I'm not affiliated with them, and it is manages their Wi-Fi. So it's a router, and they only are allowed to get a certain amount of Wi-Fi, and once that time is expired, it turns off.
Okay, just a quick question. It came up in another session. In the sense, the amount of the Wi-Fi, do you do it based on their age? Okay, awesome. That was my
sort
question.
of age, and also, like, you know, I think there's not always hard and fast rules. My 11-year-old is 1,000 times more responsible and more mature than my 17-year-old.
Yes.
It's the way. He came out that way. He got a little bit of this from me, a little bit of this from his dad, and a lot of Nona. Like, he's like, my mother is what he is. It just came out like that. It's genetics. So he's really, like, he's just that way. But my older kid, Max, he's really great with, like if I were to, like, we just came back from Disney, and I was like, if you ain't on the bus, we leaving without you. And he was like, all right. And then we left him. My friends were like, I can't believe you left him. And I was like, he's 17 years old, people. Come on.
Yeah.
I was going on to the city at 15 with my friends, hopping on the train. You know what I mean? Like, come on, people. It's Disney World. It's magical. So number one, let's put a limit on things so that it cuts down friction. And the way that I manage Wi-Fi, and I feel like this is an important conversation because, like, we're all impacted by this, right? Is that you say, here's your time, you manage it. And what I do with my kids is, if they want extra time, they already know what are the things they could do to get extra time. They come to me. There's no more arguing. They come to me and say, I'm going to empty the dishwasher, cut the lawn, whatever it is. Can I have extra time, and how much?
Wow, I love that system.
Yep. No more arguing. That's how we roll. That's it. And sometimes when I see they're on really early, I go, you're not going to earn extra time today. Today's the day you're not earning extra time. Okay. All right, mommy. You know, like, whatever. So number one, teenagers. So kids' mouths move when their bodies are moving. So don't go into your kid's room and their device and think you're going to have the best conversation in the whole world. It's not going to happen. It's like, you know, when you're in the middle of whatever show you're watching, Downton Abbey or whatever, and you think you're going to look up and talk to your partner. Like, it's not a great time. So really get your kids out doing activities with you and meet them where they are at. Now, I like doing certain things. My husband likes doing certain things. So I love to cook. Luckily, but my kids really enjoy a variety of things. So I like to do crafty stuff. I like to go out. I like to go to lunch. I like to just do stuff. And my kids enjoy it. And I like to tell them in advance, like, hey, tomorrow we're going to make true story, I'm making kohlrabi salad. My kids love it. Don't ask. So it's a big thing. It takes like 2.5 hours to chop it and stuff like that.
Yes.
So, and I make like a quadruple batch because it's so complicated. So I'm like, hey, we're making kohlrabi salad. I'm going to need your help. And then they'll be like, what time? What are we going to do? How much are we going to make? Whatever. And then you just start talking when you're doing stuff. That is really, really, really critical. Certainly get on and play video games with your kids sometimes too. I don't love to do that, but my husband will. I'll play another kind of game. I'm like, listen, you know, I'm not a big fan of video game. Why don't you pick out any board game you want? They always pick out like Life. And I'm like, oh God, it's going to be 3 hours.
Yes.
I'm like, can we do Uno? Can we do Connect 4? But just connect through activity, and don't do the Spanish Inquisition and grill your kids about whatever. Just start talking about whatever. Just like I talked about my day, the next thing I knew, my kid started asking me and talking about his stuff.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's just like anything else, you know? So, and if you are talking to them about them stuff, like talk to them about stuff that they like. I'm not saying you don't have uncomfortable conversations. You got to have uncomfortable conversations with your kids. I mean, your kids will say, I don't want to hear it right now. You say, I understand that, but we've got to address this, that, and the other thing. What do you need me to do for this? You know? And don't ask your kids yes and no questions. Only ask open-ended questions. You know? Are you smoking pot? No. So I do things like, how much pot are you smoking?
Make them think about it, like, what, wait, I'm not, though.
Today I asked one of our clients, I was like, how much pot are you smoking? He's like, I'm really not. And I was like, okay, what happened? And he was like, I really feel sick when I do it. And I said, oh, let me explain why. Because we did a brain scan. So, so I threw him for a loop by asking him how much pot he smokes. So he either was going to be a total pot smoker or not. There was no in between for him. So, so I think that's important. And, you know, teenagers are trying to find their way and they want to spend time with you. And also, like, every generation experiences stress, but I feel like these poor guys, they don't got a chance. You know, I would be in so much trouble with everything being captured on video.
Right. And that social media pressure is just,
oh
my gosh, yeah.
So it's a lot, you know what I mean? It's a lot. Everything is like looks a certain way, and the teenager brain believes that that kid is really, you know, on the outside looking that good, but in the inside, that's just not the way it is, you know? And with so many kids struggling with mental health, I mean, anxiety, depression, suicide ideation is record highs. Nobody is really immune from these things. It's just that you can be very functional. You can look good. Your grades can be good. The American culture really, really uses grades as a benchmark for mental health, and it's wrong.
Right. Definitely.
Like, you know, so that's important. But that's a great question. That's the only way to get your teenager off their computer, really honestly, is to do stuff with them.
Right. And I think maybe even like you were saying about social media, maybe even talking to your kids. Because I can't even imagine if I was going out with a group of friends, and I probably would have gotten in trouble. But if they had always videotaped everything we did.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I was telling my kids when we were at Disney or whatever, because, you know, they know, like, I was an awesome college student. I graduated a year early with my PhD. And people are like, I've never heard of that. I'm like, well, I did it. And I was like, you guys know I was like a terrible student in high school. And they're like, no. And they're like, what did you do in class? I said, oh, I read books. And they're like, oh, you read books? I said, oh, nothing related to classwork. I just sat and read my books all the time, and then I did my homework. It was the 80s, you know what I mean? Like, it was a totally different time. So I was just bored out of my mind. Like, I was like, oh yeah, this is so boring. So it was great to have that conversation with them, because I really strive to be a very imperfect parent, and I love to point out my mistakes to my kids. And they love to tease me about it. It's really quite a little shtick in our family. And it's one of my greatest compliments ever as a parent is my youngest was extremely dyslexic. He's remediated. He's like above grade level in reading. And his teacher said, I don't mean this like in any disrespectful way. She goes, I have never had a kid with dyslexia who turns in his work and is like, I'm good. She goes, he knows he did his best. And he's like, this spelling is terrible, but I did awesome, and I'm awesome, and I'm a genius. And he's such a good student. He just can't spell. So, and she goes, I don't know what you did, but he feels so good about himself. He is going to be more than fine. He's going to be awesome.
Yourself to them.
Yeah. Right.
Definitely. Yes.
You know, and I did a lot of that by showing him all the things that I did terrible.
Okay.
I love that. Know? Making yourself a human being to your children is so important. Like, they don't need the gory details of everything, but making sure that they know, you see this put together person today, but let me tell you how many times I dropped you off the bed while you were little. You know?
And even when you make those little mistakes, you know, like I'm always rushing around like every other mother, and I tend to drop things like right when you're leaving, and I drop the olives all over the floor or whatever. And we just laugh about it. And I'm always like, well, at least I didn't break a toe. Remember when I broke my toe when I dropped the computer on it, you know? And then my kids just think it's so funny, you know, like it's not that serious. And then when it's serious, I'm like, oh no, now we can't be funny. Like, this is serious. Like, this is like a safety thing or something like that. They're like, oh, okay. All right. You know, and they just don't take, like, you know, they don't get stressed in the same way that these other kids do. They learn to problem solve and figure things out, you know?
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah,
so if people are out there listening and they want to connect with you.
Yeah.
Tell us about your books and everything.
Well, I have a great book. It's called It's Gonna Be Okay. And it's really designed to help parents they don't have to get on the internet and go down the rabbit hole. I've done the research for you. There's 40 pages of research so that you can find. So I'm a nerd. You got to have the research, but there are so many ways that we can change the brain.
Okay.
And I think when your kid, especially when they're younger, and especially when they're really bright, and so many kids with ADD and learning issues and are really bright, they always want to wait and see. They always want to wait, right? So nobody ever regrets getting help. They only regret when they don't. But I think one of the ways parents, they lose their power by every time they go to their physician, they're like, what do I do about this focus problem? Like, I'm a big fan of Google MD. I'm a big fan of listening to podcasts and reading books and things like that. I'm not saying never get help. Absolutely. I'm a licensed mental health professional. But what I want parents to know, it's the micro moments that build the macro change. Mm-hmm. And we really have so much power as parents, and you're already working really hard. This is not more. This is shifting what you're doing so that there's a bigger impact, right? And then we can lessen stress. So in my book, It's Going to Be Okay, it literally goes through many different ways to support your child. All you need to do is pick one and stick with it for 30 days. You know, you need constancy to change behavior. It'd be great if we had the one and done, but that's just not works. But people can follow me anywhere, Dr. Roseann, as Dr. Roseann, DrRoseann. That's drroseann.com. That's TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, all under Dr. Roseann. And I try to put resources and content out there that's meaningful and useful to give parents the tools. Like this week, we're talking about school refusal on social all week because kids struggle sometimes, and school refusal behaviors are at also an all-time high, with anxiety and depression fueling it, with other conditions as well. So for sure. And then I have something that's a bonus for people. If anybody wants I have coping skills. What I like to focus on is parents can have short little statements and things that they say to their kids to get them to be problem solvers, because we want our kids to be problem solvers, good problem solvers when we're not around. And when you force them by the wording you use to think on ways for them to cope, instead of saying, don't worry about it, you can say, wow, that was really hard. How did you do that?
Right. Exactly.
Right? And you get them to start processing and feel in control. But you can go to teletherapytoolkitbonus.com, and I have over 100 statements there that I've done. And then if anybody's got an attention issue, thank you for sharing all my resources. I have a great webinar, drroseann.com webinar or EF webinar, same thing. It's 5 ways to boost your child's attention and executive functioning. So because attention, people are really struggling with attention and executive functioning, adults too.
Awesome. Yes. Wow, you have just such a plethora of information and science research, which is very helpful.
Well, there's so much science. We know what helps people. It's just that we don't lead people in that direction. We go and do the same things, which is only seems to be talk therapy and medication. There's a whole other world out there. And people need to do what feels right to them, but they also need to find something that works and stick with it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And what works for one child may not work for the rest of the
No. I mean, and it may not align with the family's values, you know what I mean, too, So, some of the things I ask people to do are really hard, like dietary changes. I mean, it's easier to get somebody to change their religion than it is to get them to change what they eat. But you want to really get your brain working real fast. Direct pipeline, what you put in your mouth goes right into your brain,
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Yes.
This has been awesome.
Yes, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for being.
Oh, so much pleasure. So much fun. Keep doing what you're doing. And I as we did start this, I said, I know sometimes people think working with kids is hard. Oh no, working with couples is way harder. And they fight about parenting.
Right. But those skills are learned in childhood and how you relate to your siblings and all that.
Number one way you learn to parent. And that, just like genetics, what you learn from your family and parenting does not mean that's how you have to, doesn't define you. It's not.
Exactly.
It's not what it is. So it's recognizing this isn't working and then switching it so that you're not working as hard.
Right. Definitely. Well, you're welcome back anytime. And thank you so much for being
here. Well, so lovely, ladies. Be well. And wherever you are, mama and papa and grandparent and caregiver is exactly the journey you need to be. You just need to take one step towards change and it will pay off.
Yes. And stick to it for 30 days, like you said.
Absolutely.
All right. We'll take a break.
Life can be overwhelming sometimes. We think we are a burden to others. We think that it's better to hide it and suppress our hurt, but it's not. As Cave Coral Therapists, we will provide you with quality, confidential counseling services in a relaxing and peaceful environment. Talk to a professional today. Book an appointment on www.cavecoraltherapist.com or call 239-565-6921.
Welcome back to the Bringing Intimacy Show, where intimacy is real. Dr. Roseann was wonderful.
Absolutely. I loved every moment of it, and just the highlighting of seeing children as growing human beings. They're not little adults. They're their own entity, and they need support too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love how her strategies were simple. Mm-hmm. And creative. And that is really important in today's world.
Oh, yes, it is. I loved every moment. It was a great show.
Yes, definitely. So what's coming up next? Oh, I will see you face to face for the first time.
Yes.
We face to face now, but in person.
So excited that in the coming weeks, our shows are going to be, next week on the 8th, we will be right there together doing our show at the Sex Down South conference. So I'm super excited about that. That's going to be next Thursday the 8th. On September the 15th, we're going to have Tessa Lord with Stay Woke. On September the 22nd, we have Tracy Owen with 7 different realms of relational intimacy. And then on September the 29th, we have Alan Carl with What Would You Risk to Unleash Your Passion and Follow Your Dream? Great shows coming up.
Yes. What would you risk? Wow. Okay. Thank you again. And Susan Clark, thank you for watching our show and stuff. We really appreciate that.
Yes,
and anyone else who's out there, if you're watching our show, please let us know if you have questions or comments or you want to see something on our show. Just let us know. Yes. This has been the Bringing Intimacy Back show. Thank you, Coach K, for co-hosting again. And we will see you guys next week. And you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and of course, YouTube and on Clubhouse.
Absolutely. See you all next week.
Okay, see you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Bringing Intimacy Back, where intimacy is real. You can also find us at bringingintimacyback.com, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Dr. April Brown's 7-book series, Improving Intimacy, is now on Amazon. We'll see you next Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Don't forget to follow, share, and subscribe.